They say Chicago summers are short. So was my marriage, apparently. I'm Graham Doyle, 41 years old, and I used to think I knew my wife. Used to think a lot of things, actually. Like how trust works, how marriages survive, and how people who claim to love you can look you straight in the eye while they're planning to destroy everything you've built together. But let me back up. 3 months ago, I was just another finance analyst at Morrison & Associates, grinding through quarterly reports while my wife Audra climbed the ladder at DellaNova Advertising. She was the head of PR there, brilliant at her job, stunning in that way that made other men stare a little too long at company mixers. I was proud of her success, proud to be married to someone so ambitious and sharp. Our son Ben, 16 and sarcastic as only teenagers can be, used to joke that Mom worked harder than Dad because she came home later. Dad's home by 6:30, he'd say, adjusting his headphones. Mom's networking until 9. Networking, that word should have been my first clue. The morning everything started unraveling began like any other Tuesday in July. I was making coffee when Audra rushed downstairs, already dressed in one of those power suits that cost more than my monthly car payment. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Colin flashed on the screen. "Your boss is calling early," I said, handing her a mug. She grabbed the phone quickly, almost defensively. "He's not my boss. He's the VP of Client Relations. We're working on the Henderson account. VP Colin Fletcher, 45, divorced. The kind of guy who wore expensive cologne and talked about his CrossFit routine at every meeting. I'd met him twice at company events. Both times he'd made a point of mentioning how lucky I was to have such a talented wife." "Henderson again?" I asked. "You've been working late on that account for weeks." Audra's smile was practiced, the same one she used with difficult clients. "Big account, big responsibility. You know how it is." I did know how it was. What I didn't know yet was how it really was. She kissed my cheek, and I caught the faint scent of wine on her breath. At 7:15 in the morning. "Late night?" I asked. "Client dinner ran long. You were already asleep when I got home?" I watched her grab her keys and head for the door. "Audra?" She turned back, eyebrows raised. "What time did you actually get home?" "I don't know, Graham. Late. Why does it matter?" The thing is, I'm an analyst. Details matter to me. Numbers, patterns, inconsistencies. They all tell stories. And Audra's story was starting to have some interesting plot holes. I'd been asleep at 10:30 the night before. She'd texted me at 9 saying she was wrapping up dinner. But when I got up at 2 a.m. for water, her side of the bed was still empty. Her car wasn't in the driveway until sometime after that. Client dinners don't usually run until 2 in the morning, not in Chicago, not on a Monday night. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and started thinking, really thinking, about the late nights that had become routine, about the new clothes, the extra attention to her appearance, about how she'd started password protecting her phone, about how she'd stopped looking me in the eye when she talked about work. Ben wandered downstairs around 7:40, grabbing a granola bar and his backpack. "Mom seemed stressed," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Yeah, big project at work." "Must be some project. She's been stressed for like 3 months." 3 months, that was specific. "You've been keeping track?" Ben shrugged, the universal teenage gesture for, obviously, but I'm pretending it's no big deal. "She used to help me with my music theory homework on Tuesday nights. Now she's never here Tuesdays, or Thursdays, or most Fridays." Out of the mouths of babes. My 16-year-old son had noticed a pattern I'd been too trusting, too stupid, or too busy to see. After Ben left for school, I did something I'd never done before in 15 years of marriage. I went upstairs to Audra's dresser and looked through her things. I felt like a criminal, but I also felt like an idiot for not doing it sooner. In her jewelry box, tucked under a tangle of necklaces, I found a hotel key card, the Fairmont. Room 1247, and the magnetic strip was worn, like it had been used multiple times. My hands were shaking as I turned it over. No dates, of course. Hotel key cards don't come with timestamps. But the Fairmont was downtown, 6 blocks from DellaNova's offices. Convenient for client meetings. I put the key card back exactly where I'd found it and went to work. But I couldn't concentrate on spreadsheets. Instead, I found myself thinking about patterns, about evidence, about what a good analyst would do with suspicious data. A good analyst would gather more information. That evening, Audra came home at 8:30, claiming another networking dinner had run long. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd had a productive day. "How was the Henderson account meeting?" I asked over dinner. "Good, productive. Colin thinks we're close to closing the deal." "Where did you meet? Downtown?" A pause. Just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. The usual place. You know, that restaurant near the office. I didn't know. She'd never mentioned a usual place before. Which restaurant? Another pause. Graham, why all the questions? You've never been interested in the details of my work before. She was right. I hadn't been. I'd trusted her completely, assumed that when she said she was working late, she was working late, assumed that when she said she was networking. But assumptions, I was learning, could be dangerous things. Just curious, I said. You've been working such long hours lately. I want to understand what you're dealing with. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I appreciate that, honey. Really. It's just been a crazy few months. But it'll calm down soon. The squeeze felt practiced, like her morning smile, like something she'd rehearsed. That night, after Audra went to bed, I sat in my home office and did what analysts do best. I started building a spreadsheet. Column A, dates of late nights. Column B, claimed reason. Column C, time left for work. Column D, time returned home. Column E, inconsistencies. I went back through our shared calendar, through my own memories, through the fragments of conversations I could remember. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Late nights had increased dramatically starting in April. They clustered around Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. They always involved client meetings or networking events that seemed to require extensive preparation and follow-up. And they all coincided with times when Colin Fletcher would have been available. I closed the laptop and stared out the window at our quiet suburban street. 15 years of marriage. A son we both adored. A house we'd bought together, painted together, filled with memories of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and lazy Sunday afternoons. Was I really prepared to believe it was all built on a lie? The answer, I realized with a clarity that surprised me, was yes. If the evidence pointed that way, then yes. Because the alternative, ignoring what I was seeing, pretending everything was fine, living in willful blindness, would be worse than knowing the truth, even if the truth was going to destroy everything. I opened the laptop again and added a new column to my spreadsheet. Action items. The first entry was simple. Gather more evidence. The second was more complex. Figure out what to do with it. I had no idea, sitting there in the dark at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, that I was about to become very, very good at both. The next morning, I called in a personal day and did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I followed my wife. Not physically. I'm not a private investigator, and I wasn't about to start lurking in parking garages like some discount detective. But I had resources. I had access to our joint credit card statements, our phone records, our shared Uber account. I had spreadsheets. Audra left for work at her usual time, claiming another early meeting with the Henderson account team. I waited 30 minutes, then started digging. The credit card statements told an interesting story, charges at the Fairmont Hotel bar, multiple times. Always on the same days as her late networking meetings. Always around 7 p.m., which was interesting because most business dinners don't start with drinks at 7 if they're supposed to be actual dinners. The Uber records were even more revealing. Rides from the office to the Fairmont, rides from the Fairmont back to the office or to her car. Sometimes rides from the Fairmont directly home, which explained why her car would be in the driveway, but she'd smell like wine and claim she'd been driving. I cross-referenced the dates with her calendar, with the times she'd texted me about working late, with the nights I'd gone to bed alone. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was overwhelming. My wife was having an affair with Colin Fletcher. They were meeting at the Fairmont Hotel, probably in that room whose keycard was hidden in her jewelry box, and she was lying to me about it with the kind of casual expertise that suggested she'd been practicing for months. I sat back in my desk chair and tried to figure out how I felt. Angry, obviously. Betrayed, certainly. But underneath those expected emotions was something else. A cold, analytical satisfaction at having solved the puzzle. And beneath that, something darker. Something that whispered about consequences and accountability and making sure that actions had appropriate results. I picked up my phone and called Janine Morrison, my colleague and closest friend at Morrison & Associates. Janine was 43, divorced, and had survived her own husband's affair with a combination of legal savvy and strategic ruthlessness that I'd always admired from a safe distance. "Graham, aren't you supposed to be at work?" "I need advice," I said. Hypothetically speaking, if someone discovered their spouse was cheating, what would be the smartest way to handle it? A long pause. Hypothetically? Let's go with that for now. Jesus, Graham. Audra? Hypothetically. Another pause. Okay. Hypothetically, the person being cheated on should not confront the cheating spouse until they've secured legal representation, documented all evidence, and prepared for the possibility that the confrontation will trigger immediate escalation. Escalation? The cheating spouse will either confess and beg forgiveness, or they'll deny everything and try to make the victim feel crazy for having suspicions. If it's option 2, they might also start hiding assets, destroying evidence, or preparing their own legal strategy. So confrontation is a bad idea? Immediate confrontation is a terrible idea. Strategic confrontation, after you've built an airtight case and secured your own interests, can be very effective. I absorbed this. Any recommendations for legal representation? Terry Vaughn at Vaughn & Associates. He specializes in infidelity cases, and he's ruthless in the best possible way. Want his number? Yes. Graham? I'm sorry, really. Audra always seemed like she had her act together. Yeah, that's what made her so good at it. I called Terry Vaughn's office and made an appointment for that afternoon. Then I spent the rest of the morning expanding my evidence file. I printed credit card statements, Uber receipts, phone records showing the frequency of calls and texts between Audra and Colin. I took photos of the hotel keycard. I created a timeline that showed the correlation between her claimed work obligations and her actual whereabouts. By the time I left for my appointment with Terry Vaughn, I had a folder that would have made any prosecutor proud. Terry's office was in a glass tower downtown, all chrome and leather and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Chicago River. Terry himself was about 50, gray-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Mr. Doyle," he said, shaking my hand, "Janine Morrison speaks very highly of you. She says you're thorough." "I try to be." "Good. Thoroughness wins cases. Show me what you have." I laid out my evidence folder on his conference table. Terry went through it methodically, occasionally nodding or making notes on a legal pad. "This is excellent work," he said finally. "Comprehensive, well-documented, and completely legal. No privacy violations, no questionable methods, just good old-fashioned analysis." "So you think I have a case?" "I think you have a slam dunk. The question is what you want to do with it." "I want a divorce. I want custody of my son. And I want to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else." Terry leaned back in his chair. "The first two are straightforward. Illinois is a no-fault state, but adultery can still influence asset division and custody arrangements, especially when you have this level of documentation. The third item is more interesting. What exactly do you have in mind?" "I want consequences, real ones. I want her to understand that actions have results." "Legal consequences or personal consequences?" "Both." Terry was quiet for a moment, studying me. "Mr. Doyle, I need to be clear about something. I can help you achieve a favorable divorce settlement. I can help you protect your parental rights. I can even help you ensure that your wife's adultery becomes part of the public record, which might affect her professional reputation, but I cannot and will not help you with anything that crosses legal or ethical boundaries." "I understand. I'm not talking about anything illegal or unethical. I'm talking about making sure the truth comes to light in a way that has appropriate consequences." "The truth has a way of doing that on its own, especially when it's well documented." Terry smiled. "Sometimes it just needs a little help finding the right audience." We spent the next hour discussing strategy. Terry would begin preparing divorce papers, but we wouldn't file immediately. Instead, we'd gather additional evidence and wait for the right moment to act. "The key," Terry explained, "is controlling the narrative. Right now, your wife thinks she's in control of the situation. She thinks she's managing the affair successfully, keeping it secret, maintaining her marriage as a cover while she explores other options. When we're ready to move, we want to shatter that illusion completely." "How?" "By making sure everyone who matters knows the truth at the same time. Her employer, her colleagues, her friends, her family. We create a situation where denial becomes impossible and damage control becomes futile." I liked the sound of that. That evening, I went home and acted normal. I asked Audra about her day, listened to her talk about the Henderson account, nodded sympathetically when she complained about long hours and difficult clients. "Colin's been putting a lot of pressure on everyone," she said over dinner. "He's really invested in making this deal work." "He sounds very hands-on," I said. "He is. Sometimes I think he cares more about the account than anyone else in the company." Ben looked up from his phone. "Isn't he the guy who called during my birthday dinner?" Audra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That was an emergency." "On a Saturday night?" Ben asked. "Business doesn't stop for weekends, honey." Ben shrugged and went back to his phone, but I caught the look he gave me. My son wasn't stupid. He was starting to notice the same patterns I'd been tracking. After dinner, Audra announced she had to go back to the office to finish some paperwork. "On a Wednesday night?" I asked. "The Henderson presentation is tomorrow. I want everything perfect." She kissed my cheek and grabbed her keys. "Don't wait up. This might take a while." I waited until her car was out of the driveway, then checked our Uber account on my phone. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, there was a charge for a ride from DellaNova's office to the Fairmont Hotel. I opened my evidence file and added another entry to the spreadsheet. Then I opened my laptop and started researching DellaNova Advertising's company newsletter. Every company has internal communications, newsletters, blogs, employee portals where information gets shared and gossip gets spread. DellaNova was no exception. Their monthly newsletter, DellaNova Dispatch, featured employee spotlights, company news, and a section called Office Buzz that was essentially sanctioned gossip about workplace happenings. The editor was someone named Patricia Mills. According to the company directory, she was in HR and had been with DellaNova for 8 years. I spent some time crafting an email, anonymous, of course, sent from a temporary account that couldn't be traced back to me. "Dear Patricia," I wrote, "I thought you might be interested in a story for the Office Buzz section. There's been some interesting after-hours networking happening between certain VPs and department heads. The Fairmont Hotel bar has become quite popular for client meetings, if you know what I mean. Might be worth looking into for your next issue. A concerned colleague." I hesitated for a moment before hitting send. Once this email was out there would be no taking it back. The truth would start spreading, and I wouldn't be able to control how fast or how far it went. Then I thought about Audra's practiced smile that morning, about the wine on her breath at 7 a.m., about the hotel key card hidden in her jewelry box, and the lies she'd been telling me for months. I hit send. Audra came home at midnight, claiming the presentation prep had taken longer than expected. She smelled like wine and expensive cologne that wasn't mine. "How did it go?" I asked. "Good, really good. Colin thinks we're going to nail the presentation tomorrow." "I'm sure you will," I said. "You and Colin make a great team." She looked at me sharply, as if trying to detect sarcasm in my voice. But I kept my expression neutral, supportive. "We do work well together," she said finally. "That's important in business, chemistry." Another sharp look. "Yes, it is." I kissed her goodnight and went upstairs, leaving her to turn off the lights and set the alarm. As I brushed my teeth, I wondered how long it would take for my email to Patricia Mills to bear fruit. I didn't have to wonder long. The DellaNova Dispatch came out every first Friday of the month. This Friday was August 4th. I was at my desk at Morrison & Associates when my phone buzzed with a text from Audra. "Call me, now." I waited 10 minutes, then called her back. "Graham, the most ridiculous thing happened today." "What's wrong?" "Someone sent an anonymous tip to our company newsletter. Some malicious gossip about Colin and me having an affair." I let the silence stretch for a moment. "That's terrible. What did the newsletter say exactly?" "It was in the Office Buzz section. Just a blind item, no names, but everyone knows who they're talking about." "Which VP has been conducting late-night client meetings at downtown hotels, and which department head has been attending these meetings with unusual frequency?" "It's completely inappropriate." "Wow, that does sound inappropriate. What are you going to do?" "HR is investigating. They want to interview everyone who might have information about the source of the tip." "That makes sense. You can't have people spreading malicious rumors in the workplace." "Exactly. It's completely unprofessional." "Audra? Yeah? Is there any truth to the rumor?" The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. "Of course not, Graham. How can you even ask me that?" "I'm sorry. I just had to ask. You know how my mind works. I like to have all the facts." "The fact is that someone is trying to sabotage my career with malicious gossip, and I'm going to find out who." After she hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. The truth was starting to find its audience. The DellaNova Dispatch incident was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Audra's carefully constructed world start to develop cracks. She became paranoid about her phone, never leaving it unattended. She started working later, claiming she needed to rebuild her professional reputation after the newsletter incident. She began asking me pointed questions about my day, my colleagues, whether I'd heard any gossip about her company. "Someone's targeting me," she said over breakfast one morning. "This isn't random. Someone with access to information about my schedule is feeding stories to the press." "The press?" I asked. "I thought it was just the company newsletter." "It spread beyond that. There's a blogger who covers the advertising industry, Adland Expose, and they picked up the story. They're calling it Hotel Networking, when business meetings get personal." I made a mental note to check out Adland Expose later. "That sounds awful. What does HR say?" "They're being very careful. They can't take action based on anonymous rumors, but they're monitoring the situation." She made air quotes around the phrase. which means they're waiting to see if more evidence surfaces. Will it? She looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I mean, if someone's really targeting you, they probably have more than just rumors. They might have actual evidence of something. Evidence of what, Graham? I don't know. You tell me. The conversation ended there, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was starting to realize that her secret might not be as secret as she'd thought. That afternoon, I got a call from Terry Vaughn. We need to meet, he said. Something interesting has developed. I met him at a coffee shop near his office. He was carrying a manila folder and wearing the kind of expression lawyers get when they're about to deliver good news to their clients. Your wife's company is conducting an internal investigation, he said without preamble. They've interviewed several employees about the newsletter incident. How do you know that? I have a contact in their HR department. Apparently the investigation has turned up some interesting information. He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. Hotel receipts, credit card records, Uber charges, all showing a pattern of after-hours meetings between your wife and Colin Fletcher. I looked at the documents. They were similar to what I'd compiled, but more detailed. Where did these come from? That's the interesting part. They came from multiple sources. Someone in accounting flagged unusual expense reports. Someone in IT noticed patterns in email and calendar data. Someone in security reported after-hours badge access to Fletcher's office. Multiple sources? It appears your wife and Mr. Fletcher weren't as discreet as they thought. Several people noticed the pattern, but nobody said anything until the newsletter story gave them permission to speak up. This was better than I'd hoped. The affair wasn't just my suspicion anymore. It was becoming common knowledge within DellaNova. What happens next? That depends on how your wife and Fletcher handle the investigation. If they come clean, they might face disciplinary action but keep their jobs. If they continue to deny everything in the face of mounting evidence, they get terminated. Most companies have morality clauses in their employment contracts. Adultery between employees, especially when it involves expense account fraud and misuse of company resources, is grounds for immediate dismissal. Expense account fraud. I hadn't thought of that angle, but it made sense. If Audra and Colin were using company money to fund their hotel meetings, that was more than just adultery. It was theft. How long before the company makes a decision? Soon. HR investigations move quickly once they start finding evidence. I'd guess within the next week. I went home that evening feeling like a chess player who just put his opponent in check. Audra was in the kitchen, making dinner with unusual intensity, chopping vegetables like they'd personally offended her. Rough day? I asked. The investigation is expanding. They're looking at expense reports, email records, calendar data. It's like they're trying to build a case against me. Maybe they're just being thorough. If someone really is spreading false rumors about you, a comprehensive investigation will clear your name. She stopped chopping and looked at me. You really think the rumors are false? It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. This was her chance to come clean, to tell me the truth before I had to confront her with evidence. Part of me hoped she'd take it. I think, I said carefully, that the truth has a way of coming out, regardless of what anyone wants or hopes. That's not an answer, Graham. It's the only answer I can give you right now. She went back to chopping vegetables, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands were shaking slightly. That night, after she went to bed, I checked the Adland Expose blog. The story about DellaNova had been updated with new information. Details about the company's internal investigation, speculation about which employees were involved, and a promise of more revelations to come. The blogger, who went by Madison Avenue Maven, clearly had inside sources at DellaNova. The level of detail was too specific to be based on rumors alone. I wondered how many people at Audra's company were feeding information to the press. How many colleagues who'd smiled and made small talk with her were now actively working to expose her affair. The thought should have made me feel sorry for her. Instead, it made me feel satisfied. Actions have consequences. Lies catch up with you. Trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt with more lies. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Is this Graham Doyle? I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, Who's asking? Someone who thinks you should know what your wife has been saying about you at work. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean? She's been telling people you're controlling and paranoid, that you've been accusing her of having an affair because you can't handle her success. She's setting up a narrative where you're the problem. Who is this? Someone who works with your wife, someone who's tired of watching her lie to everyone, including you. I thought for a moment, then typed, What exactly has she been saying? That you've been going through her things, checking her phone, following her. She's telling people she's scared of how you might react if the investigation doesn't go her way. My hands were shaking as I read this. Audra was building a defense strategy, painting me as an unstable husband who was harassing her based on unfounded suspicions. If she could make the affair look like a paranoid delusion on my part, she might be able to save her job and her reputation. Do you have proof of what she's been saying? Recordings? She doesn't know I've been documenting her conversations. Why are you telling me this? Because she's about to throw you under the bus to save herself, and because someone should know the truth about what she's really like. I stared at the phone for a long time before responding. What do you want from me? Nothing. Just thought you should know what you're dealing with. The conversation ended there, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to her breathe, wondering how many other lies she'd told about me, how many people she'd manipulated to protect her secret. In the morning, she was gone before I woke up. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. Working late on damage control. Damage control. That was one way to put it. I called Terry Vaughn and told him about the text messages. This is escalating faster than I expected, he said. If she's actively building a defense strategy that involves discrediting you, we need to move quickly. What do you recommend? We file for divorce immediately, before she has a chance to establish her narrative, and we make sure the filing includes all the evidence we've compiled. Will that become public record? Divorce filings are public record. If a journalist wanted to look up the details of your case, they could do that. And if someone tipped off a journalist about when and where to look? Terry was quiet for a moment. That would be unfortunate for your wife's privacy, but it wouldn't be illegal. That afternoon, I called Madison Avenue Maven. The blogger agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She turned out to be a woman in her 30s, sharp-eyed and professionally dressed, with the kind of aggressive curiosity that made her good at her job. You're Graham Doyle, she said, sitting down across from me. Audra Fletcher's husband. Audra Doyle, I corrected. She kept her maiden name professionally, but we're still married. For now. You've been following the DellaNova story closely. It's a good story. Workplace affairs, corporate cover-ups, expense account fraud. My readers eat this stuff up. What if I told you the story was about to get more interesting? She leaned forward. I'd ask what you know. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Divorce filing. Being submitted tomorrow morning, public record as of tomorrow afternoon. She opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Her eyebrows rose as she read. This is comprehensive. Hotel records, credit card statements, timeline analysis. You've been busy? I'm an analyst. It's what I do. Why are you giving this to me? Because I believe in transparency, and because my wife has been telling people I'm paranoid and controlling. I want the facts to speak for themselves. Madison Avenue Maven closed the envelope and looked at me appraisingly. You know this will destroy her career. Her choices destroyed her career. I'm just making sure people know what those choices were. Fair enough. She stood up and shook my hand. Thank you for the tip, Mr. Doyle. This will make an excellent follow-up story. That evening, Audra came home at 11:30, looking exhausted and defeated. How was damage control? I asked. Terrible. The investigation is expanding. They're bringing in outside auditors to look at expense accounts. They're interviewing people from other departments. It's becoming a circus. I'm sorry. That sounds really stressful. She looked at me suspiciously. You don't sound sorry. You sound... What? Satisfied. I considered my response carefully. I'm not satisfied that you're going through this, but I am satisfied that the truth is finally coming out. What truth, Graham? You tell me, Audra. What truth is the investigation going to find? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her making a decision. Fine, she said. You want the truth? Colin and I have been working closely together, very closely, but it's not what you think? What do I think? You think we're having an affair, but we're not. We're planning to start our own agency. The hotel meetings were about business plans, client lists, financial projections. Everything we've been doing has been about building something together. It was a good lie. Creative, plausible, and just close enough to the truth to be believable. If I hadn't seen the hotel key card, if I didn't have the credit card records showing bar charges instead of business meeting expenses, if I hadn't spent weeks building an airtight case, I might have believed it. That's a relief, I said. I'm glad you're finally telling me the truth. She relaxed slightly. I wanted to tell you sooner, but we needed to keep it confidential until we were ready to make our move. Of course. When are you planning to announce the new agency? Soon, after this investigation nonsense gets resolved. That makes sense. And Colin's wife knows about the business partnership? A pause. We haven't told our families yet. We wanted to make sure everything was solid first. Right. Well, I'm proud of you for taking such a big step. Starting your own business takes courage. She smiled for the first time in days. Thank you. I was worried you'd be upset about the secrecy. I understand why you had to keep it quiet. Business is business. We went to bed that night with Audra believing she'd successfully managed the situation. She thought her new story would explain away the hotel meetings, the late nights, the suspicious behavior. She had no idea that in the morning, her world was going to collapse completely. The divorce papers were filed at 9 a.m. By noon, Madison Avenue Maven had published her follow-up story. DellaNova scandal deepens. VP's affair leads to divorce filing. The story included excerpts from the divorce filing, details about the expense account fraud, and quotes from sources close to the investigation about the company's response to the scandal. By 2 p.m., Colin Fletcher had resigned from DellaNova. By 4 p.m., Audra had been placed on administrative leave pending the completion of the investigation. By 6 p.m., the story had been picked up by 3 other industry blogs and 2 Chicago business publications. My phone started ringing at 6:30. Graham, what have you done? Audra's voice was shaking with rage. I filed for divorce. I thought you should know. You leaked our private business to the press. Divorce filings are public record, Audra. I can't control who reads them. This is going to destroy everything. Yes, I said. It probably will. How could you do this to me? I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. The line went quiet for a moment. I'll fight this, she said finally. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Good luck with that, I said, and hung up. I poured myself a drink and sat down to wait for the next phase of the war to begin. The next morning brought chaos. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. with calls from reporters, colleagues, and people I barely knew who'd somehow gotten my number. I let them all go to voicemail. Ben came downstairs looking confused and worried. Dad, there are people with cameras outside. I looked out the front window. 3 news vans were parked on our quiet suburban street, their crews setting up equipment on our lawn. What's going on? Ben asked. I sat him down at the kitchen table and explained as much as I thought he could handle. His mother had been having an affair with her colleague. I'd filed for divorce. The story had attracted media attention because it involved corporate fraud. So Mom's been lying to us, he said when I finished. Yes. For how long? A few months, at least. Ben was quiet for a moment, processing this. Are you okay, Dad? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on strategy and evidence and consequences that I hadn't really considered how I was feeling. I'm angry, I said honestly, and hurt. But I'm also relieved that the truth is finally out there. What happens now? Now we figure out how to move forward. Will Mom go to jail? Probably not. What she did was wrong, but it wasn't criminal. She'll lose her job, and she'll have to deal with the damage to her reputation. But she won't go to jail. Ben nodded, then looked toward the front window where the reporters were gathering. Should I go to school today? Let's see how things develop. You might want to stay home for a few days until this calms down. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Audra. I can't get to the house, she said. There are reporters everywhere. I noticed. This is insane, Graham. They're treating this like some kind of major scandal. Corporate fraud usually attracts attention. It wasn't fraud. The hotel meetings were business meetings. Audra, I have credit card records showing charges at the hotel bar, not the business center. I have Uber receipts showing rides between the hotel and your apartment at midnight. I have testimony from hotel staff about your regular visits to the same room. Stop lying. Silence. I want to come home, she said finally. This is my home. You made your choice when you decided to have an affair. I have nowhere else to go. You can stay with Colin. Oh, wait, he's probably dealing with his own divorce right now. Graham, please, can't we work this out privately? We had months to work this out privately. You chose to spend that time lying to me instead. I hung up and immediately called Terry Vaughn. The media attention is more intense than we expected, I said. That's good for us. Public pressure will make it harder for her to drag out the divorce proceedings or make unreasonable demands. What should I expect next? She'll probably try to negotiate, offer to settle quickly in exchange for privacy, but that ship has sailed. The story is already public. What about custody? With the evidence we have of her deception and the corporate fraud allegations, you're in a strong position. Courts don't like parents who demonstrate poor judgment and dishonesty. That afternoon, I got a call from an unexpected source. Colin Fletcher. "We need to talk," he said. "I don't think we have anything to discuss. Meet me at Murphy's Pub on Clark Street, 1 hour. If you don't show up, I'm going to start telling reporters my side of the story." "What's your side of the story?" "That your wife pursued me, that she told me your marriage was already over, that she manipulated the situation to make me think I was helping her escape an abusive relationship." I felt my anger spike. "Abusive relationship?" "That's what she told me, that you were controlling, paranoid, and potentially violent. She said she was scared of how you'd react if you found out she was planning to leave you." This was the narrative my anonymous text contact had warned me about. Audra was painting me as an abuser to justify her affair and gain sympathy. 1 hour, I said, and hung up. Murphy's Pub was a dive bar in Lincoln Park, the kind of place where people went to drink away their problems in relative anonymity. Colin was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a half-empty beer in front of him. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the kind of exhaustion that comes from having your life implode in the span of 24 hours. "Sit down," he said without looking up. I slid into the booth across from him. "You wanted to talk." "I want to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "I keep my mouth shut about what Audra told me about you, and you don't pursue the corporate fraud angle." "I'm not pursuing anything. The company is conducting its own investigation." "You could make it go away. Tell them you were mistaken about the expense account charges." I stared at him. "Why would I do that?" "Because if I start talking to reporters about your wife's claims that you were abusive, it's going to get ugly for both of us." "Let me understand this. You want me to help cover up your fraud in exchange for you not repeating lies my wife told you about me?" "That's about the size of it." I leaned back in the booth and studied Colin Fletcher. He was desperate, cornered, grasping at any strategy that might limit the damage to his reputation and career. "Here's a counteroffer," I said. "You tell me everything Audra said about me, and I don't make sure the reporters know about your wife's divorce attorney." His face went pale. "How do you know about that?" "I'm an analyst, Colin. I analyze things. Your wife filed for divorce yesterday, about 6 hours after you resigned from DellaNova. She's claiming adultery and seeking half of your assets, including your stock options and retirement accounts. That's private information. Divorce filings are public record, just like mine." Colin took a long drink of his beer. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. When the affair started, how it developed, what she told you about our marriage, what you two were planning for the future." For the next hour, Colin Fletcher told me the truth about my wife's affair. It had started in March, just as my spreadsheet had indicated. Audra had approached him, not the other way around. She'd been flirtatious, complimentary, gradually escalating their interactions from professional to personal. She'd told him that our marriage was loveless, that I was controlling and suspicious, that she was planning to leave me but needed to be careful about how she handled it. She'd suggested the hotel meetings as a way to discuss their business partnership, the story she'd tried to sell me the night before, but there had never been any real business plan. It was just a cover story for their affair. "She was planning to divorce you," Colin said, "but she wanted to make sure she got the house, custody of your son, and a favorable financial settlement. She thought if she could document your controlling behavior, she'd have leverage in the divorce proceedings." "What kind of documentation?" "She was keeping a journal of your interactions. Times when you asked about her schedule, when you seemed suspicious, when you checked her phone or went through her things. She was building a case that you were emotionally abusive." This was worse than I'd imagined. Audra hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been systematically building a legal strategy to destroy me in the divorce proceedings. "Did you know she was married when you started the affair?" Colin looked uncomfortable. "Of course I knew, but she made it sound like the marriage was already over in everything but name." "Did you believe that?" "I wanted to believe it." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." I left Murphy's Pub with a recording of our entire conversation on my phone and a much clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Audra hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she'd been planning to destroy me in the process. That evening, I called Madison Avenue Maven and arranged another meeting. "I have an update to the story," I said. "What kind of update?" "The affair was part of a larger plan. Your original story was just the beginning." We met at the same coffee shop as before. I played her selected portions of my conversation with Colin, the parts where he described Audra's strategy to document my abusive behavior and use it against me in divorce proceedings. "This is explosive," she said when the recording finished. "She was setting you up." "That's what it looks like." "Are you willing to go on the record with this?" "Yes. I think people should know what really happened." The follow-up story published the next morning. DellaNova scandal. Affair was cover for elaborate divorce scheme. The article detailed Audra's plan to use the affair as a stepping stone to a more favorable divorce, her attempts to document false evidence of abuse, and Colin's admission that he'd known she was married but had chosen to believe her story about an already failed marriage. The reaction was swift and brutal. DellaNova announced that both Audra and Colin were being terminated for cause, which meant they'd forfeit their severance packages and stock options. The Illinois State Bar opened an investigation into whether Audra's documentation of false abuse allegations constituted fraud. 3 other advertising agencies where Audra had applied for jobs rescinded their offers. And Colin's wife's divorce attorney leaked details of his financial situation to the press, revealing that he was now facing financial ruin in addition to professional disgrace. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, but I declined them all. The facts spoke for themselves. That evening, Ben and I ordered pizza and watched the news coverage of the scandal from our living room. "Mom's really in trouble, isn't she?" he said. "Yes, she is." "Do you feel bad for her?" I considered the question carefully. I feel bad that she made choices that led to this situation, but I don't feel bad that she's facing consequences for those choices. She lied to both of us. Yes, she did. For months. Yes. Ben was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you found out the truth, Dad, even if it's messy." "Me too, son. Me too." My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Audra. I'm at a hotel downtown. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss custody arrangements?" I showed the message to Ben. "What do you think? Should I meet with her?" "What would you talk about?" "Probably her trying to convince me to take some of the blame for what happened, or offering to settle the divorce quickly if I agree to keep quiet about her plans to frame me for abuse." "Are you going to do that?" "No, I'm going to let the legal process work the way it's supposed to work." I texted back, "All communication should go through our attorneys." The response came immediately. "Please, Graham, I just want to explain." I showed Ben the message. "She wants to explain." "Explain what? How she was planning to destroy you to cover up her affair?" I looked at my 16-year-old son, who'd somehow developed better judgment than his mother. "You're right," I said, and deleted the message without responding. The next morning brought news that Colin Fletcher had been arrested for embezzlement. The DellaNova investigation had uncovered evidence that he'd been using company funds for personal expenses, including the hotel meetings with Audra. The charges carried a potential sentence of up to 5 years in prison. I felt a grim satisfaction reading the news. Actions have consequences. Lies catch up with you. Justice sometimes actually works. My phone rang with a call from Terry Vaughn. "We need to discuss settlement terms," he said. "I thought Audra wanted to fight this." That was before her accomplice got arrested for embezzlement. She's ready to negotiate. "What's she offering?" "Everything. Full custody to you, minimal spousal support. She keeps her car and personal belongings. You keep the house and retirement accounts." "In exchange for what?" "Your silence. She wants you to stop talking to reporters and agree to seal the divorce records." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No deal." "Graham, this is a very favorable settlement. You'd get everything you wanted." "I don't want her silence. I want accountability. The records stay public, and I'll talk to whoever I want to talk to." "She's not going to like that." She should have thought about that before she decided to destroy our marriage and frame me for abuse. Terry was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure about this? Public divorces can get ugly." "It's already ugly, Terry. The difference is now everyone can see exactly how ugly it is." "All right, I'll convey your position." That afternoon, I got a call from Ben's school. He'd been in a fight with another student who'd made comments about his mother. I picked him up from the principal's office and took him out for ice cream. "You didn't have to defend her honor," I said. "She gave up the right to that when she started lying to us." "I wasn't defending her," Ben said. "I was defending us. Our family." The kid was saying stuff about how we must have known what was going on, how we were probably just as bad as her. "What did you tell him?" "I told him we were the victims, not the villains, and that if he had something to say about my family, he could say it to my face instead of whispering about it behind my back." I looked at my son with pride. "How do you feel about everything that's happened?" "Angry, disappointed, but also relieved." "Relieved? I knew something was wrong for months, but I didn't know what. Now I know, and now we can deal with it instead of pretending everything's fine." That evening, Audra called my phone directly. "Graham, please, we need to talk." "I told you, all communication goes through the attorneys. I'm your wife." "No, you're the woman who's been lying to me for months while planning to destroy me in a divorce proceeding. There's a difference." "I never wanted it to go this far." "What did you want, Audra?" What was the end game here? A long pause. I wanted out of the marriage, but I wanted to make sure Ben and I were taken care of. So you decided to frame me for abuse? I wasn't framing you. I was documenting behavior that concerned me. What behavior? Asking where you were? Wondering why you were coming home at 2 a.m. smelling like wine? Noticing that you'd started password protecting your phone? You were becoming paranoid and controlling. I was becoming suspicious because you were lying to me. I had to lie. You never would have understood about Colin. You're right. I never would have understood why my wife decided to have an affair instead of asking for a divorce. It wasn't supposed to be an affair. It was supposed to be a transition. A transition to what? To a new life, with someone who appreciated me. And you thought the best way to achieve that new life was to destroy your old one with lies and fraud? Silence. Audra, you had choices. You could have asked for a divorce. You could have gone to marriage counseling. You could have been honest about what you wanted. Instead, you chose deception, manipulation, and betrayal. Those choices have consequences. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? You systematically destroyed our marriage while planning to destroy me in the divorce proceedings. That's not a mistake. That's a campaign. What do you want from me, Graham? Nothing. I don't want anything from you anymore. What about Ben? Ben deserves a mother who tells the truth. If you can figure out how to be that person, we can discuss visitation arrangements. Until then, he's better off with me. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning brought the final piece of news I'd been waiting for. Audra had been arrested for insurance fraud. The investigation had revealed that she'd filed a false claim 6 months earlier, reporting that expensive jewelry had been stolen from our house. The jewelry, including the pieces she'd been wearing to her hotel meetings with Colin, had never been stolen. She'd simply hidden it and collected the insurance money. The fraud charges carried a potential sentence of up to 3 years in prison. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the news coverage, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The truth was, finally, completely, publicly known. The consequences were finally catching up with all the lies. Justice was finally being served. My phone rang with a call from Terry Vaughn. She wants to plead guilty to all charges and accept whatever settlement terms you're willing to offer. What's she offering now? Everything. Full custody, no spousal support, no contact except through attorneys, sealed records if you want them. And in exchange? She wants you to write a letter to the judge asking for leniency in her criminal sentencing. I thought about it for a long moment. No, I said finally. Graham, this is total victory. You get everything you wanted. I get everything I deserved. There's a difference. And she gets everything she deserves too. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That afternoon, I picked Ben up from school and we drove to the lakefront. We sat on a bench overlooking the water and watched the boats in the harbor. How are you doing with all this? I asked. Better than I expected. It's weird not having to pretend everything's normal anymore. What do you mean? I've been pretending for months that I didn't notice Mom was acting strange, that I didn't know something was wrong. It's actually a relief not to have to pretend anymore. Do you miss her? Ben considered this carefully. I miss who I thought she was. But I don't think that person ever really existed. She's still your mother. I know. But being someone's mother doesn't give you the right to lie to them for months while you plan to destroy their family. I looked at my 16-year-old son and realized he'd learned something important from this experience, that love without honesty isn't really love at all. What happens now? He asked. Now we figure out how to build a life based on truth instead of lies. That sounds good to me. We sat by the lake until sunset, watching the light fade over the water, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were going to be okay. The truth had set us free, and sometimes that's the best revenge of all. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in late August, I woke up to find news vans back on our street. But this time, they weren't there for me. Audra had been sentenced the day before, 18 months in prison for insurance fraud, 2 years probation for her role in the corporate embezzlement scheme, and a permanent ban from working in the advertising industry. Colin Fletcher had received a harsher sentence, 4 years in prison for embezzlement, restitution payments that would consume most of his assets, and his own ban from the financial services industry. The story had become a cautionary tale about corporate ethics, workplace affairs, and the consequences of choosing deception over honesty. I was making breakfast when my phone rang. Madison Avenue Maven. I'm working on a follow-up piece about the aftermath of the scandal, she said. How are you and your son adjusting? We're doing well. It's been an adjustment, but we're building a new normal. Any regrets about how you handled the situation? I thought about the question as I flipped pancakes for Ben. I regret that it came to this. I regret that my son had to learn his mother was capable of such deception. But I don't regret exposing the truth. Some people might say you were vindictive, that you could have handled this privately. Some people might say that, but those people probably haven't been systematically lied to for months by someone they trusted completely. Privacy is a privilege you earn through honesty. Audra forfeited that privilege when she chose deception. What's next for you and Ben? We're moving forward. Ben's starting his senior year of high school next week. I'm considering a job offer from a firm in Seattle. We're talking about a fresh start. Running away from the scandal? No, running toward a future that's built on truth instead of lies. After I hung up, Ben came downstairs for breakfast. More reporters? He asked, glancing toward the front window. Last interview, I think. The story's winding down. Good. I'm ready for things to get boring again. We ate breakfast in comfortable silence, something that had become precious to both of us over the past few weeks. No tension, no lies, no wondering what the other person was really thinking. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry Vaughn. Divorce finalized. Papers will be ready for pickup this afternoon. I showed the message to Ben. It's official. How do you feel? Relieved, free, ready to start over? Me too. That afternoon, I drove to Terry's office to sign the final divorce papers. The settlement was exactly what I'd wanted. Full custody of Ben, the house, our retirement accounts, and no ongoing financial obligations to Audra. She could have avoided all of this, Terry said as I signed the documents. If she'd just asked for a divorce honestly, she probably would have gotten half of everything and shared custody. But then she wouldn't have been able to control the narrative. She needed to be the victim, not the person who chose to end the marriage. Her need to control the story is what destroyed her credibility completely. I left Terry's office with a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The legal process was finished. The truth was public. The consequences had been served. That evening, Ben and I ordered Chinese food and watched a movie. Halfway through, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. Graham? It was Audra, calling from prison. What do you want? I wanted to apologize. To you and to Ben. Okay. I know I hurt you both. I know I made terrible choices. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I looked at Ben, who was watching me carefully. I put the phone on speaker. We can hear you, I said. Ben? Honey, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to get hurt by any of this. Ben was quiet for a moment. Mom, why did you do it? I don't know, sweetheart. I was unhappy, and I made bad choices instead of dealing with my problems honestly. Were you ever going to tell us the truth? A long pause. I don't know. I kept thinking I could manage the situation, keep everyone happy, make it work somehow. But you couldn't. No, I couldn't. Mom? Yes? I love you, but I don't trust you anymore. The silence that followed was heartbreaking. I understand, Audra said finally. I hope someday I can earn your trust back. Maybe, Ben said, but it's going to take a long time. I know. And you'll have to prove it with actions, not just words. I know that too. After she hung up, Ben and I sat quietly for a few minutes. How do you feel? I asked. Sad, but not guilty anymore. What do you mean? For a while, I felt guilty about being angry with her, like maybe I should forgive her because she's my mom. But talking to her just now, I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending what she did was okay. That's very mature. I learned it from watching you handle all this. You never tried to make me hate her, but you also never asked me to pretend her choices were acceptable. The next morning, I got a call from the Seattle firm that had offered me a job. We'd like to make the offer official, the hiring manager said. Senior analyst position, 20% salary increase, full relocation package. When could you start? I looked around our kitchen at the house where Ben and I had lived through the worst period of our lives and come out stronger. I need to discuss it with my son, I said. Can I get back to you next week? That evening, Ben and I drove to the lakefront again. It had become our place for important conversations. Seattle's a long way from here, he said. It is, but it's also a chance to start fresh. New city, new job, new opportunities. What about my senior year? There are good schools in Seattle, and you'd be starting somewhere nobody knows our story. Ben considered this. Is that important? People not knowing? I don't know. What do you think? I think I'm proud of how we handled this situation. I don't want to run away from it. We wouldn't be running away. We'd be moving forward. What's the difference? Running away means you're ashamed of what happened. Moving forward means you're ready to build something new. Are you ashamed of what happened? I thought about the question carefully. I'm not ashamed of how we handled it. I'm not ashamed that we stood up for the truth. But I am ready to build a life that's about more than just surviving someone else's lies. Ben nodded. I think I'd like to try Seattle. Are you sure? Yeah, but I want to come back and visit Chicago sometimes. This is where I learned that families can survive anything if they stick to the truth. 2 months later, we were loading a moving truck in front of our house. Several neighbors came by to say goodbye and wish us well. You handled a terrible situation with dignity, Mrs. Patterson from next door said. Your son is lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other, I replied. As we drove away from Chicago, Ben looked back at the city skyline in the rearview mirror. Any regrets? He asked. About leaving? About any of it. I thought about the question as we merged onto the interstate heading west. I regret that your mother made choices that hurt our family. I regret that you had to learn some hard truths about people you trusted. But I don't regret that we faced those truths honestly. What do you think would have happened if you'd never found out about the affair? I think she would have continued lying until she was ready to leave, and then she would have used her fake evidence to destroy me in the divorce proceedings. So finding out saved you. Finding out saved both of us. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Illinois countryside roll past the windows. Dad? Yeah? When I get married someday, I want to marry someone who tells the truth, even when it's hard. That's the most important quality you can look for in a partner. Is that why you and Mom didn't work out? Because she couldn't tell the truth? Your mother and I didn't work out because she chose deception over communication, manipulation over honesty, and self-interest over family. Those aren't the foundations of a healthy relationship. But you loved her once? I loved who I thought she was, but I'm not sure that person ever really existed. Ben was quiet for a moment. I'm glad we know the truth now, even though it hurt. Me too, son. Me too. 6 months later, we were settled in Seattle. Ben was thriving at his new school, making friends, playing in the jazz band. I was enjoying my new job, working with colleagues who knew nothing about my past except that I was a good analyst and a devoted father. One evening, I got a call from Madison Avenue Maven. I'm writing a book about corporate scandals, she said. I'd like to include a chapter about the DellaNova case. Would you be willing to be interviewed? What's the angle? How ordinary people can protect themselves when they discover they're being manipulated. Your story shows that careful documentation and strategic thinking can level the playing field against people who think they can control the narrative through deception. What would you need from me? Just your perspective on how you approach the situation, what you learned, what you'd do differently, what advice you'd give to someone facing similar circumstances. I thought about it. I'll do it on one condition. What's that? I want the focus to be on the importance of truth-telling, not on revenge. What happened to Audra and Colin wasn't revenge. It was consequences. There's a difference. I understand the distinction, and I think that's exactly the message readers need to hear. The book came out a year later. Truth and Consequences: How One Man's Search for Honesty Exposed a Web of Corporate Deception. The chapter about our case was titled Networking is Hell: When Business Relationships Cross the Line. Ben, now 18 and preparing for college, read the chapter and gave me his review. It's weird seeing our story in print, he said, but I'm glad people will know what really happened. Any regrets about how public everything became? No. If Mom had told the truth from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. But since she chose lies, I'm glad the truth came out completely. What did you learn from all of this? Ben thought for a moment. I learned that families are built on trust, and trust is built on truth. I learned that people who really love you don't lie to you for months while planning to destroy you. And I learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Those are good lessons. They're expensive lessons, but they're good ones. That evening, I sat on our deck overlooking Puget Sound and reflected on the past 2 years. The pain of discovery, the anger of betrayal, the satisfaction of justice, and finally, the peace of moving forward. Audra was scheduled to be released from prison in 6 months. She'd written several letters asking to reconnect with Ben, but he'd chosen not to respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-protection. Maybe someday, he'd said, but she'll have to prove she's changed, not just say it. Colin Fletcher had been released on parole and was working at a grocery store in Milwaukee, the only job he could find with his criminal record. His ex-wife had remarried and moved to California with their children. The DellaNova scandal had become a case study in business schools, a cautionary tale about workplace ethics and the importance of corporate oversight. And Ben and I had built a new life based on the principles we'd learned the hard way: honesty, accountability, and the understanding that love without truth isn't really love at all. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben, who was out with friends. Having dinner with some people from school, home by 10, love you, Dad. Simple, honest. No hidden agenda, no deception, no manipulation. Just truth. I smiled and texted back, "Have fun. See you at 10. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, honestly, and with the people who choose to do the same. The truth had set us free. And that, I realized, was worth everything we'd been through to find it.